Take a common setting, one that the reader is comfortable with, even familiar, and add to it something fantastical. This could be supernatural, nonsensical, exaggerated, extrasensory, or quite a variety of things to most readers, which would be unbelievable. The narrators and characters in the story believe the fantastical to be true, even normal, and really pay little attention to it. This is a form of storytelling and art called Magical Realism. South American writers have taken Magical Realism and created a greater depth, even complexity. They made it theirs. This contributed to an explosion in popularity of South American writers around the world known as the boom. This occurred in the 1960s and 70s. South American magical realism seems to be more cultural, political, and at times more complex than magical realism of other parts of the world. It is often about oppression or the lower social classes. The writers are usually from middle to upper class families, but defenders of the lower classes. The magical part of the writing is often based on local culture. The roots in a simpler culture are more strongly about what is magically unknown. That is, in things we cannot explain. Folklore contributes strongly to this. Nearly all the most well-known of South American magical realists spent significant time in Europe and other South American countries. Most of them also spent time in exile. South America has had a long tradition of writers holding high political positions, including the presidency of their countries. This began as early as Domingo Sarmiento, who was Argentina's second president, serving from 1868 to 1874. Sarmiento was one of Argentina's great writers and still has books in print. The remainder of this episode, I will speak about the magical realist writers of South America who contributed significantly to the boom. Gabriel Garcia Marquez was from Colombia. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature, the highest awarded prize for writing. This was mostly for his work of 100 Years of Solitude, the second most Spanish-translated book. Only Don Quixote, which was written by Miguel de Cervantes in the early 1600s, has been translated more. 100 Years of Solitude has spells, magic, levitation, and flying carpets. In one of the most amazing pieces of writing I have read, Marquez describes a tiny amount of blood which has fallen to the floor. It then continues to move, going downstairs. It makes its way out to the street, knowing when to turn, when not to. Goes over curbs, chooses to not run over certain things out of respect and not staining. And after a complicated path, finds itself to a place of a person who knows and recognizes it. Time is often cyclical in magical realism, as we in humanity continue to make the same mistakes over and over. For those unfamiliar, a banana republic is a description of a country with its primary economic source as the growth of fruit. Quite often these countries have been more or less controlled by such companies as United Fruit or by colonial powers. United Fruit was often able to get the CIA or American government to intervene politically on their behalf. Many Latin American writers wrote about this. The Banana Massacre, which is portrayed in 100 Years of Solitude, was based on an actual event. This was a strike over horrible working conditions of United Fruit in the country of Colombia. The U.S. military threatened to invade if this was not taken care of, and position troops off the coast of Colombia. This was in the interest of United Fruit. The Colombian military then slaughtered up to 2,000 workers and forced the remaining workers back to work. Gabriel lived most of his life in exile from the violence of Colombia. Mario Vargas Llosa, a magical realist writer of Peru, won a Nobel Prize for Literature in 2010. He also ran against Alberto Fujimori in 1990 for president of Peru. He spent nearly 2 decades in exile. In Venezuela, Romulo Gallegos won the presidency in 1948. A military coup overthrew him later. He, like many other magical realists, often questions what has been silenced by the mainstream, such as culture, class, histories, etc. His best-known novel, Doña Barbara, achieved worldwide fame. It is about a strong woman who casts spells over men, then takes their land and possessions. I have 3 magical realist writers from Chile, Isabel Allende, Gabriela Mistral, and Pablo Neruda. Isabel is said to be the world's most widely read writer in Spanish. She is a cousin of Salvador Allende, the former president of Chile, who was overthrown by a coup by General Augusto Pinochet. After the coup, Isabel fled for her life to Venezuela. Her most famous work is House of Spirits. She was clearly influenced by Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude, in that this is also a multi-generational account using the supernatural, magic, people able to see into the future, a dog who becomes the size of a horse, along with political and social upheaval. Gabriela Mistral was an early magical realist and the first Latin American woman to win the Nobel Prize for Literature. Pablo Neruda also won a Nobel Prize for Literature. He ran for president of Chile and was also exiled. His writings include descriptions of food with emotional and human-like traits. My experience with Argentina is that it is more educated than the other Latin American countries. The magical realism movement, as I have read, was greatest in Argentina. Though magical realism was used to question things politically, it also opened up the exploration into other areas. I've read various studies claiming Argentina has the heaviest usage of psychologists and counselors of any country. Perhaps, with this tremendous exploration into their own minds, it also encouraged its writers to explore the unconscious in writing. Magical realism lent itself easily to this. Argentina has had many great magical realists. The 2 most known are Jorge Luis Borges and Julio Cortazar. Jorge was nominated for 4 Nobel Prizes for Literature and won 1. He too lived for a time in exile. He said he imagined paradise would be a sort of library. Perhaps I will later do a biography or a study on his works. In his work, Funes de Memorias, he explores what it would be like to have a perfect memory, claiming a man is not able to think because he is overcome with the details of memories. The character with the perfect memory, Iranio Funes, acquires this by falling off his horse and hitting his head. In Borges' Library of Babel, the whole universe is a library. It contains all combinations of letters. Because of this, everything that could be written is there, although nearly all of it is gibberish. He makes the point, if one walks for centuries through the library, one would see books repeating themselves. Jorge likes to explore dreams and possibilities. In one writing, he condenses all of time into one moment. In another, a character keeps waking up into another dream, and in which There are infinite number of dreams. In the circular ruins, a character creates a man by dreaming about him. Julio Cortazar explores other realities and is very philosophical, wondering if there are other dimensions. In Continuity of Parks, a man's reality blends with that of the book he is reading. The Hopscotch has Cortazar inviting the reader to read the story in different ways, such as skipping whole chapters or sections. In The House Taken Over, the narrator lives in a sizable house, but something comes to another portion of the house. The narrator closes off and locks the door, closing off that portion of the house where the something is living. This allows the something to occupy only a portion of the house. What it is isn't said, and the main character comments on how they can clean the minimized portion of the house so much quicker, as if the occupation were a good thing. In Southern Thruway, Cortazar doesn't use names, but identifies characters by the cars they drive. Julio was exiled during the Dirty War in Argentina and would spend the remainder of his life in Spain. Please subscribe and like, as this is how YouTube sends it on to others. Thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing day, and see you in the next episode.